Welcome to Southern Steep. Southern Steep is a public health and social justice podcast that centers the voices of community leaders in the Southern United States. Conversations highlight innovative approaches to unapologetic leadership, meaningful partnership, and thriving communities. I am one of your co-hosts, Isaiah Webster, and reminding you that this podcast is brought to you by NASTAD, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization in Washington, D.C. You can learn more about NASTAD at nastad.org, NASTAD.org. Well, this is a very special edition of Southern Steep. For the first time in our history, and by history, I mean 4 or 5 episodes, we're going to have all 4 co-hosts participate in this particular episode to talk about why we're doing this podcast, to talk about what they're bringing to the podcast, and to talk about what we want to get out of our guests in the coming months and years. And I'd like to begin by just introducing the co-hosts to you one by one, and then we will get their voices into the space. First up is Torrian Baskerville. From his online Southern Steep bio, it says he is a native New Jerseyan, found, wow, I'm reading this and I still can't get it right. A native New Jerseyan, Torrian Baskerville found love at first sight over 15 years ago with his first visit to Atlanta, Georgia. It was a slow-paced big city for him. Moving to the South on a journey to self-discovery, Torrian found healing power in the shrimp and grits and grounding in the strong faith as he navigated through the process. However, it was his unwavering sense of community that loved on Torrian enough to birth the resilience, confidence, and foodie that he is, making him an adoptive son of the South. Welcome, Torrian.
Hey.
So I felt like your bio was an attempt to color over the fact that you're not a Southerner, but that you're trying to co-opt the space that true Southerners like I were born into.
Perception is reality. However, I just love the South. It's particularly the food in the South.
I know you know because you edit all of our episodes. On one of the very first pods that I did, I mentioned how I have this issue with my voice. And part of what I'm trying to do in the podcast is modulate it a little bit. And when I think about it, I'm going for the Donnie Simpson kind of video soul voice. And I feel like you are trying to do it better than me. And I have some issues with that. So could you get out of my space?
I think the difference, though, is that mine is just a natural and you are attempting to do it. That's the difference.
Torrian, we work together all the time. It's a delight to work with you on this podcast. Our next co-host is Nicole Elenoff, a 100% Florida girl. Nicole loves the kitschy, unique charm of the South and what it has to offer, including Florida man. I don't know what she meant by that. The love for community and the resilient nature of the South strengthens her desire to serve and bring her great joy. Just as much as joy as collard greens does, biscuits, grits, and all the other things give to her stomach. I can't read today because this is right here in front of me. Nicole, go ahead and correct everything I just butchered in your bio.
I'm just really surprised with all the news that you consume and your Twitter that you don't know who Florida Man is. Florida Man is a national treasure.
I thought you were referring to your husband.
You know, he is a man who lives in the state of Florida, but I would say he's more of a lumberjack type and not a wrestling a gator in the lagoon, like swamp, whilst holding onto his cigar still.
Wait a minute. You have a lumberjack husband?
I do. I just want to say that there's been a lot of Nicole discoveries done today. We're going to get to them in a little bit, but I've counted 3 Nicole discoveries today.
Our fourth and final co-host is Bianca Ward. Although a Midwest girl at heart, Bianca has spent the past 18 years living, working, and growing in the DC area. The South represents community pride and resilience, all of which fuels Bianca's purpose and passion to serve. But more importantly, she now has a great appreciation for grits, which should always be savory and never sweet. Y'all talk a lot about grits. Bianca, what's up?
We talk a lot about food, period. And it's funny because I just saw this meme that said you never hear people say, I can't wait to eat that food up north. Like it's always food down south. And I am new to grits. I didn't grow up with grits. My family is Jamaican. I grew up with ackee and saltfish and fried dumpling. So I didn't start eating grits until about 4 years ago. And now I am a grit connoisseur. And I also, I make a mean grit with a little cheese, a little butter.
I hope this isn't offensive to anyone in the pod right now or anyone that's listening. I don't feel like sweet grits is really a Southern thing. I lived almost my entire life in Louisiana, and no one I knew put sugar in their grits. It was just salt, pepper, and butter. Is there do any of you put actual sweet things in your grits?
I know people who swear by sugar,
No.
like sugary grits. And I'm like, why don't you just eat porridge or oatmeal?
Yeah, that's what sweet should be.
That is an attack on the grits gods.
Now, I will say this. I never use water in my grits. I use either milk or a portion milk and water. It makes it so much creamier and so much better. So
The density.
yes.
So I use heavy cream and chicken broth. Try it. Don't sleep. It's a creamy situation. And flavorful because the chicken broth is. And then you don't have to use so much salt because you have the broth, but it's kind of nice.
So I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but just to kind of orientate our listeners. So the format of our podcast, which Nicole will talk about later on, is that we pair up and we do each episode. And so by design, the four of us are not all on every episode. And so this really is a special opportunity for us to be together on one podcast. And it's actually the first time we've all been on a podcast together, even though we are all equal co-host of this endeavor. And so what we wanted to do was to let our listeners know a little bit more about us and who we are and why we're doing this. So in preparation for today, we decided to do our birth charts according to the stars. And I just want to say up front, there's a difference between astrology and astronomy. I'm a fan of both. But today we're talking about astrology, which is a little bit different from, the physics and all that kind of stuff. So we want to say that up front. We also want to say that it's in fun. We're not trying to say that we're experts. I'm certainly not. I'm an amateur for sure. But we did do each other's chart. Well, I did the charts for everyone. And we're going to spend some time going through those as a way of kind of revealing what the universe says about us. So when I sent the charts, Nicole, I'm actually going to start with you. When I sent the charts earlier, you were like, what is this? Why are we doing this? I don't understand anything. I just want to see, do you understand like the general concept of a astrological chart?
I know the different astrology signs. I know that they have elements. And I know that there's like stars and moons, and they all need to align at certain parts. And then birth year is involved in birthplace, and there's a lot of symbols. And I didn't go through everything because I didn't understand it. So I'm really looking forward to this experience.
I'll give you an explanation in a second, but I do want to say one thing because you have already stumbled onto one of my sacred cows. There's actually only one moon. The moon is what we call our satellite. And some planets have satellites, but there's actually only one moon, and that's Earth's satellite. Jupiter has 26 satellites, I believe, and they all have different names, none of them moon.
I'm glad I learned something new today. And I also just really appreciate that this is happening right now, that we're talking about this.
So in a nutshell, so here's the 10-second explanation of your chart. According to astrologers, where the position of the sun and the moon at the time of your birth says certain things about your personality. And so, in order to do your chart, you just look at where the sun and the moon was positioned in our sky at the time of your birth. So, I for each one of the co-hosts, I put in your birth dates, where you were born, and the time, and voila, your chart. So, Nicole, I think so. We have these 22-page documents of our charts. It's really a lot of information, but the gist of it is where the sun and the moon was at the time of your birth, and we don't want to go into the detail about the other planets because that would take way more time than we have. But I have your chart in front of me, and I wanted to see if you could go down to page number 6, which gives the short description of where the sun was. You're a Scorpio for the purposes of our listeners. And where it says short description, you want to just read what it says there?
I was muted. One of the joys of Zoom. My short description: physical energy and courage, strong passions, regeneration and improvement, strong sexual powers, potential issues. She is suspicious, defiant, extremist, and she is sometimes vindictive.
And I think the safest way for me to ask you this question is just to say, how do you respond to that?
I feel like this is an alignment with a lot of the traditional Scorpio characteristics. And I'm very passionate. And if y'all have heard me talk about this work, I'm very passionate. And this very much aligns with that.
Bianca and Torrian, do you feel like this accurately describes Nicole? Like if we had to describe her, is there anything in there that we might convey?
I think it was very, I was loud. I think very much Scorpio. And I think in terms of what you read, I know a lot of Scorpios. I am literally surrounded by them in my house. So when you read that, I was like, oh, Scorpio. Yes. Nicole specifically, I don't know. Still getting to know you. So maybe not.
There'll be a lot of time for
share that. I share that sentiment that I'm still learning, Nicole, but definitely very passionate, very passionate.
So according to your chart, Nicole, your moon is in Aquarius, and the moon represents the emotional responses, both your unconscious predestinations and your self-image. And so with your moon in Aquarius, people who have this are very observant people, extremely observant, actually. And it says that they are lifetime students of human nature, loving to analyze why people do what they do. Does that resonate at all with you?
I see this. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Can I just share another thing?
Of course.
Regarding discoveries? We were asked by Isaiah in our group chat about the birth year, and everyone was just so astounded that I was born in 1991. I'm a proud millennial. I absolutely support it. But I just want to say that on top of today's discoveries, we've discovered that Nicole Elenoff is Jewish. Yes, a proud 100% South Florida girl. 2, Nicole is age 29. And then there's a third discovery that I'm blanking on, but I'm sure I'll remember it later. That's come up from this whole discussion about these charts.
So Torrian is a Virgo. That's where his sun sits. And I know quite a few Virgos, speaking, broadly, they're always fabulous people. And I don't want to go too far into the sun sign. I feel like the sun signs are kind of well known more than the moon signs. So you want to go give us a short description of your sun sign, Torrian?
So, short description. He has a very good memory, scientific and medical studies preferred above all others. He is humble and moderate, calm and reserved, emotional discipline. He is willing to help, devoted and gentle. Potential issues: servile nature, frequent changes of occupation, quick to become annoyed, upset, worried. He is too shy.
Now, before we hear from Bianca and Nicole, Torrian, I noticed when I was reviewing it earlier, your moon is also Virgo. You are a double Virgo, which
A
means that the
Virgo through and
universe has
through.
doubled down on those qualities. Um, Thoughts?
I am a Virgo through and through. I tell people that all the time. When you think about a Virgo, think about Torrian. He is a true Virgo. But what I will say about my short description and stuff, I think is very, for the most part, very accurate. There are definitely things that through life experience, I have definitely like worked on. And so like, I'm not too shy. I'm fairly reserved, but once I get comfortable, I come out of that. What I found really interesting, which is why I chuckled extremely hard, um, frequent changes of occupation. I found that so funny because if one was to look at my resume, you would be like, oh my God. And I've actually been criticized for that before in interviews, but it's the truth and I own it.
Can you believe, Torian, that some people actually don't believe in charts and don't believe in astrology? And yet there it is, written in the stars, everything that you're doing in your life. There is truth to this.
I agree. I do. I always say that while we as individuals vary from experience to experience, I think astrology gives a baseline of behavior of how you show up in spaces.
And this is where I give my disclaimer. I have absolutely no qualifications, accreditations, or any type of certifications to be making any of these statements about the stars. It's just fun. Okay, Bianca, you're a Capricorn. And would you like to share your short description? It's at the bottom of page 6.
She is honest, reserved, circumspect, honorable, and strong willed, quietly ambitious within the realms of the possible. She likes and takes on responsibility. She can work in the social domain. Possible issues, a sometimes bitter and mistrustful mind. Did it call me bitter though? I feel like that is
The stars called you bitter.
bitter and mistrustful mind. I had to clutch my pearls with that because I don't, whew, perhaps, I don't know. Now I have to think back on previous relationships. But I think this short description is very true in terms of the strong-willed piece, the work in the social domain. That's literally where I've always been. And so, yeah, maybe that was written in the stars. I don't know about reserved because I think I am the definition of an extrovert. So maybe in just some aspects of my life, but for the most part, I'm an open book. So I feel like this was pretty spot on.
Your chart says that your moon is in Leo, and depending on the other positions of the chart, moon and Leo people are not necessarily outgoing. When they feel comfortable, they do like being the center of attention. Does that resonate at all with you?
Yes. Sometimes I will sit back. I find that like networking situations are hard for me when it's like you're supposed to go and meet people and shake hands and exchange business cards and that kind of thing. Sometimes that is tough because I never know when to start. So I like to sit back and observe. But if it's folks that I am familiar with and comfortable, yeah, life of the party.
Go ahead, Nicole. You look like you want to say something.
I'm just saying it's a good thing we're not going to be shaking hands anymore. And I'll be a wing person for you at the next networking event.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Last but not least is myself. I am an Aries. That's my sun sign. I'm a very typical Aries, I think I would say. The sun in Aries represents vitality, a sense of individualism, and an outward shining creative energy. And if you ever meet a person that seems like they have an endless amount of energy, they're probably an Aries. That's one of our number one characteristics. We are the first sign of the zodiac. We are the least evolved sign of the zodiac. Pisces is the most evolved as the 12th and final sign. My moon is let's see, Scorpio, which I knew about. I'm sorry, I was looking it up. So my moon is in Scorpio. While others might find security and comfort in immaterial things, moon in Scorpio people seek out emotional intensity. No matter what, this is something very intense about lunar Scorpios. So lunar Scorpios tend to be very intense. It's a little bit tempered by the Aries side because, generally speaking, you know, they always say that there's no good and bad signs, but generally speaking, Aries and Scorpios don't really mesh well together. Don't repeat that in front of Scorpios. So to have an Aries person with a touch of Scorpio is kind of like that weird juxtaposition. I mean, y'all kind of know me. What do you think?
Ball of energy.
Mm.
Absolutely. I recall the first time meeting you, and I was just like, oh, this is a lot of energy.
Isaiah will wear you out.
And I'm like, this is so refreshing. So creative.
The creativity, hands down. Yes. All of that energy in doses. But then at the same time, too, having worked with Isaiah for a while now and been in different spaces, there are times where I know feedback from other people, like when we've done MLP, have been like, Isaiah's so quiet and I wish we heard more from him. And I'm like, who are y'all talking about? So I think he knows how to turn it on and off.
Well, I appreciate you guys being game to like participate in this in some ways ridiculous exercise, but I thought it would be a great way for us to introduce ourselves to our listeners other than, just our bios and kind of how we arrived at NASTAD. And by the way, if you're listening, you can go to nastad.org and read our professional bios and kind of what we do at NASTAD, but we wanted to give you a little bit of sense of kind of who we are as people beyond that. So the approach we're going to take with this pod is that we're each going to kind of take the facilitator's chair, if you will, and guide a conversation. But before I pass the baton, I did want to spend a few minutes talking about kind of like our hosting style and mission and kind of how we show up in this space. I feel like we're all uniquely individuals. And so I want to just kind of go around the horn, go around our virtual table and see if folks wanted to share what their hosting style is or what their mission, if you will, as a co-host of this podcast, whoever wants to get it started.
So I'll start. I think my hosting style is I love to ask questions. I love to get to know people. I think I told our HR director one time that I love being on interview panels because I want to ask questions and dig deep. And so I think this gives an opportunity for us to not only get to know more about the organizations that our guests represent, but why they're in the work, what brought them to it, what drives them, who they are personally, what legacy do they hope to leave behind by the work that they do. And so I think my style is asking those questions that make folks pause. And reflective, because I think we all know that at the end of the day, I think especially working in nonprofit, there's usually some heart, some reasoning, some story behind how we got here. And having worked for a CBO for a long time, doing direct service before coming to NASTAD, I think it's been great to talk to folks who are in that space now and learn about new ways of doing this work. So yeah, I think that's me, asking questions and helping or hearing folks tap into their own personal mission.
Interestingly, I think I believe my hosting style is similar to Bianca's, in that I typically want to know like the why. Why do we do these things? Why are people, enjoying what they enjoy? But I think the other part of it is also like, how are people taking care of themselves and how are people really focusing on self? When you do nonprofit work, it's a lot that we give away to other people. And oftentimes we neglect ourselves. And so I think one of my missions is just making or reflecting to the guest, like, how are you taking care of yourself and how are you prioritizing yourself in this work that oftentimes we are always giving of other people?
I'll just add that while I want to know what brings folks to the work, I also enjoy shooting the shit with the people that come on to our podcast. It's really nice to be able to talk about things that are not related to the work and the daily grind. We get to learn so much about a person by the activities they like, how they are resting, how they are doing their self-care. And I also really like talking about community investment. Who has invested into those community leaders and how are they investing into others? How are they building leadership in others? And overall, just having a good time.
Yeah, Nicole, I can really align myself with a lot of that. For me, I think community folks are doing really great work. And I don't know that they get the recognition or the crowns that they deserve. And for me, my hosting style up to this point has been to really bring that to the forefront and to get people to recognize that they are really doing great things and that they are the leaders and the champions that we need them to be. And I need them to know that. And I want to celebrate the work that they're doing. And if I can pull that out of them and to have it be a little bit more in depth, I think that that's what I'm going for. Recently I asked Neil Rafferty about white privilege when he came onto the pod to talk to Nicole and I. He is a cis white gay man, and he gave a really great answer about how he's had some people who had some affinity for him that really taught him what it meant to listen and to be empathetic. And when I'm hosting this podcast, I'm trying to get people to kind of open up and share a little bit more beyond the I'm so-and-so and I have this title at this great organization. That's good. But talk to me about why you're there in the first place. And I'm really excited to do this pod with all of you. I'm going to pass the talking stick over to Nicole.
Received. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the steep. So for you all listening, we are Southern Steep Brewing Stronger Community. And so what's the steep all about? We're going to be talking a little bit about how we got to the steep and why a podcast a little later. But just overall, like our format, you're listening to this now. Welcome. Glad you're here. But we're going to be releasing podcast episodes about every 2 weeks. So you're probably listening to this on a Tuesday because you're an early riser. You're here. You're ready. You got the notification that your new latest podcast is ready to listen. That's going to be on a Tuesday. So we are going to be dropping new episodes. Isaiah mentioned that we are going to be switching it up. And I'm really excited about this Hostesses with the Mostesses conglomeration. How are you all feeling about this so far? This is our first time not on a production meeting with all of us here.
You mean you're not going to ask Bianca who her favorite co-host is? Because that would have been the really shady way to start this conversation.
Why are you so bitter? Because I was going to say so petty, because my bitter mind and mistrustful mind didn't even think you were going to say that.
What I've learned. Go ahead, Nicole.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, what I've learned about Isaiah is that, when we all get together, he can be a bit shady. And I don't know if is that a part of your chart? Is that in the chart? I don't know.
Is that in the stars?
Right. We may need to look at that.
And the one moon. It's that Scorpio moon.
Yes. Oh, it is bright and shiny.
Oh my God. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Where were we?
How's this going? I think it's going great.
I agree. This is going amazing. Like it's interesting how we all just kind of came together. And I don't know, for me being new to NASTAD, we just kind of came together and like meshed really well together. And it just has been a great ride. And so, yeah, it's good. I'm enjoying this.
Well, to take a serious, I'm sorry, Nicole. I was just going to say, just to take like a somewhat serious approach to responding to what you asked. Bianca is from CARE, and the three of us, Torrian, myself, and you, obviously, we work on the prevention side at NASTAD. And so I thought it was very important to have the perspective of someone else who could talk to that side of the house. And so Bianca's, obviously perfect to do that. But I also think that she kind of balances us out a little bit. I feel like Nicole, you and I in particular tend to be, the excited ones. Torian's a little bit more reserved. And then Bianca's kind of like, can I add a little water in here? Because y'all a little bit thick. Y'all need to be thinned out just a taste.
It's that bone broth.
There you go. There you go.
I do want to say that there was a moment in time where there were only 3 podcast hosts, myself, Torrian, and Isaiah. And there was a magical moment after a luncheon on Zoom that you held, Bianca. And we had a production meeting right after, and we were discussing who we're going to bring in for our 4th host. And Torrian and I, stars aligned, we said Bianca Ward.
I am always, and having worked in HIV for a long time, I've been on the care side, the prevention side, and CBOs. So kind of seen it all, but I love the kind of the fun, the innovative, the different type of activities and innovation that happens in prevention. Not to say that it doesn't happen in care, but this is really cool. So thank you for asking me to be a part of it. But this team has really been awesome. I think everyone brings a really great, unique perspective, and it just all comes together really nicely. So I am honored to be your care representative.
I think this just showcases a small example of how you can incorporate care program folks and prevention program folks in a program together.
Look at that.
Because we are not going to end this HIV epidemic or any of these epidemics if we are in siloed sections. So we love having some care reps over up in here.
Thank you. Yes. Tearing down the walls, if you will. I'm here for it.
So, and part of tearing down the walls, we have really been focusing on highlighting and lifting up voices of community folks in the South doing incredible, innovative work. And so that's community-based organizations, community leaders, folks doing social justice, public health work in the South. I guess my question to y'all is has there been any surprises that have come so far in the conversations that we've had on the podcast?
I don't know that I would say it's a surprise, but the perspectives and the experiences from state to state are shockingly similar. And so you never want to draw, broad conclusions about a whole region of the country, but a lot of the issues that people are facing, whether it be community engagement, access to PrEP, stigma, that seems to be the same whether we're in Alabama or Texas or North Carolina. It's amazing how year after year the commonalities that we see among folks in the South.
I would agree. And I would definitely say it's been also just refreshing and wonderful to hear folks speaking so passionately. It's just how much they love the South. We ask them if, what we want for the South or, what they would want to see for the South, which I think is great. But there's always more passion in their voice about how much they love it. A lot of folks, speak about community and their resilience and that feeling of pride. And I think that has been really, really refreshing to hear. Because on the flip, as Isaiah was mentioning, stigma, discrimination, et cetera. But folks saying, but I love it and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of charm and a lot of gems that have been dropped throughout these discussions and conversations. And to address some of those things, we have added a segment on the podcast called The Southern Charm. We would think that Southern Charm would come naturally because it's Southern charm. However, it was a contentious discussion on what we were going to title that segment. We're not going to go into all of that, but knowing this group, I'm sure that's not a surprise. Would someone be interested in talking about Southern charm? And, what do you find charming about that segment?
So I think Southern charm, the segment is really about highlighting organizations or persons who are doing really great work that may not be on the actual episode, right? And so we want to give, again, what Isaiah talked about earlier is like people not getting their flowers, right? And not getting their crowns for the work that they're doing. And so Southern Charm was our way to kind of give back and highlighting people in the work that they're doing and celebrating that. To your point, Nicole, it was a bit contentious about like what to name it, because there's so many things that you can name a segment that's talking about uplifting and about great work that people are doing. But I think the Southern Charm really does encompass what we're trying to get out of highlighting these people or these organizations.
Can I also add to that, Torrian? I don't think we need to go into our sausage making, but part of what I enjoy about our process is that 4 smart, creative people come to the production table with ideas, and we iron them out. And I think we had to hot press Nicole a little bit on the title of the segment, but at the end of the day, we came up with a really good name for it. Was it Nicole that got hot pressed or Bianca?
It wasn't me.
Was it me?
It was probably you.
It could have been this Aries Scorpio dynamic.
Yes.
The point is that someone was hot pressed, and we came to a resolution, and now it's great. The Southern
teamwork truly makes the dream work. And with that being said, I'm going to pass the mic over. Oh, I'm sorry, the talking stick over to Torrian. Because why are we doing this podcast?
Received and accepted. And so, why are we doing this podcast, right? There's so many different ways and avenues we could have taken to really do what it is that we wanted to do, right? And one of the main goals that we are wanting to achieve with doing this podcast is again, community engagement, right? And reaching out to those workers, those organizations that are really doing some really great work in the South that we oftentimes don't hear about, right? And so, from you guys' perspective, when we first talked about doing a podcast, right? When the idea was floated out by, I believe, Isaiah, why did we all get on board? Why did you decide to go with a podcast?
So, Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong. We were trying to find a way to kind of further supplement CBO Hub, and which is all about HIV prevention while social distancing. And we figured CBOs could listen to the pod safely, and we could engage with them and start to build a relationship with them, even though we're separated. Am I remembering it right?
Building relationships was a huge component of all of this, and we were looking for ways that we could do different types of engagement rather than what traditional engagement could look like. Podcast, we thought, would be a little different. As far as how I got sucked in, because this energy is just so, it just pulled us in. And
what was that?
That was the sound. And luckily I have a microphone to really share the sound. I hope One production likes that sound, by the way. Anyway, I love how we can edit. I digress. Really, that energy was so exciting. And I thought, wow, a great podcast. Wow, this could be a cool project. I'm interested. I've always wanted to learn how to do this. I listen to podcasts. Let's do it.
Yeah, and I think that it was, as you know, when we started talking about podcasts, I shared that I'm on another podcast with a group of hosts, and that so when it came on, I was like, oh yes, podcasts are really fun. It's really engaging. So I was definitely sold on it. I also think that in the midst of a pandemic where some of the community engagement we would normally want to do like in person, we cannot do. And I think a podcast is a very good interactive alternative to that in person. And so I was definitely sold on it. So Bianca, not being a part of the initial process, but then being asked to do it, right? Like, what sold you on the concept of a podcast?
Well, one, when I heard about it, I was like, there prevention goes, doing something fun again. Uh, it's okay. No feelings. I also love podcasts, love them. And I think it's a great way to, I really like the ones that kind of interview people and again, get into people's minds and their hearts. So I thought that this was really different. I appreciate that it is CBL specific because that's where I grew up, and so that kind of sold me. At first, I was like, okay, let's try this out because I'm never sure. Similar to Isaiah and I, our first episode, how I sound recorded. But after listening to a few, it's not awful. So I can stay with it. But no, I love the idea again to do something that is community centered and focused. That really truly is where my heart lives. So this opportunity just seemed right. So I was really excited. And again, prevention, so cool, so fun.
So it's weird, Bianca, because I think your voice is perfect for a podcast. I know that Torrian and Nicole know this, but for our listeners, Bianca and I do a lot of trainings together. And so I feel like you always modulate in the right way. The only time that you don't, Bianca has two beautiful children. And on occasion, when speaking to them, her voice changes and it's not so balanced.
It's not so what? Okay. Because I use my mommy tone, and that is different. It is usually me talking through my teeth.
You don't really open the whole mouth doesn't form the word.
And I think I get that from my mother. So my mother is Jamaican. And when we used to be out in public, and if I was acting just a little bit of a fool, that patois, the accent came in thick. And I was like, oh, okay, she's not playing today. But she also doesn't really want to embarrass me in front of my friends. So she wants to make sure it's just something that I understand. So yeah. So I have adapted that as well.
That fine line.
It's very fine.
And I just have to acknowledge that Aries Scorpio coming out again, coming out once again.
It's in the stars. That's all I can.
And I think the other thing too is that I don't think any of us, when we thinking about a podcast and we all were like going in and down for the cause, I don't think any of us realized how much work goes into the podcast and putting it together. And so I want to ask, now we're in 3 episodes in, right? And some more to come. Like, what are some things that you've learned that you've taken out of doing this that you find to be like, what is that Southern charm, that Southern gem that you've pulled out of learning and doing this podcast so far?
I'm going to say some intentionality. So from the beginning of figuring out who we're going to speak to, which I didn't mention earlier, it is kind of an interviewee type of style as far as the flow, but really just intentional throughout the whole way. That's been one of my big takeaways.
Obviously, our listeners don't know this, but we record these visually as well, in addition to the audio, and so we can see each other, and we can usually see our guests when we're interviewing them. And sometimes I forget how much is conveyed through visual cues. And so, but when you're doing a podcast, obviously the listeners, they're not privy to that. So you really have to, you can't mute yourself when you're laughing. You can't, if something happens visually, you need to convey that. And so I've been learning and noticing how different it is than if there was a camera in front of us or if we were in the same space with the people who are taking in our content.
Agreed.
I love it. I love it. And I would just say for me, it's like, I think one of the things, the editing piece of it, I am actually enjoying, although it's a lot of work. I think I didn't realize how much work it is to edit these episodes and kind of listen through them and create an actual episode. But I'm enjoying that process and working with our partner to get the great sound that you get when you are listening to him on Tuesdays or Wednesdays or whenever you listen to the podcast and the episodes. So now I am going to pass the baton to our lovely next guest to talk about NASTAD, Bianca.
And I received the baton because I used to run track back in the day when I was youthful. And I ran anchor because I was fast. Again, Jamaican.
That's the fastest person on the team.
Exactly. Now I don't even run up these stairs. So anywho, so NASTAD. So about NASTAD. So we are a membership organization. So for folks who don't know about NASTAD, we provide technical assistance, capacity building, assistant advocating and advocacy for state health department, HIV and hepatitis programs. And so at the heart, I usually tell people when I try to explain my job, I help health departments do what they do at the end of the day. And we do that by creating resources and webinars and meetings, trainings, et cetera. So I love the idea of this podcast because it's TA in a different way. It's us being able to learn what CBOs are doing and for them to also kind of share some of their wisdom, their experience with others that they can learn from. I think one of the things that we do well at NASTAD or encourage is that peer-to-peer exchange. On the care side, we do a lot of mentorship between Ryan White coordinators and partners so that, because I think, yes, we can help to inform around policies and procedures, but it's not the same as learning from somebody who is in that same position, maybe at another health department, but really that on the ground learning. So my question is kind of for Isaiah as the most senior member on our team and the one who's been at NASTAD the longest. It's a two-part question. One, what's your favorite form of TA that we provide? And then also, how do you think that this podcast can be used to inform the technical assistance for CBOs going forward?
So my favorite modality for technical assistance is the peer-to-peer TA that we have, where we link one jurisdiction or one organization with another, because generally what that means is that an organization or health department is struggling or they need some assistance, and we're able to take a step back and simply facilitate an opportunity for them to talk to a true peer. And that's been the tried and true way that we do our work. And it continues, as simple as it is, it continues to be one of the most effective tools to provide technical assistance. And then Bianca, the second part of your question was?
How do you think we can use this podcast or as a form of TA, or how do you see this podcast kind of as part of our technical assistance?
Yeah, I think so. We're inviting communities to come on and talk about their programs. We're inviting CBOs to come on and talk about the work that they're doing. And in essence, they're sharing their Southern charms with us. And so they're sharing their Southern charms with our listeners. And so they're beginning to create relationships with people who do the same work that they do, just in other parts of the South. And so that over time creates more connections that people can kind of build. Torrian has been doing a really good job of, when we post an episode, to link to, in the description, to link to how you can get in touch with that particular guest or that particular program. And so we're furthering disseminating all of the things that people are doing. And that's excellent technical assistance, because the folks that have been coming on have had excellent kind of wisdom to share.
Can I add on to that? I think that because we've had so many unique guests, that the different topics that are being discussed is another form of TA. So for instance, you and Isaiah for the inaugural brew had a great conversation about doula work and birth justice. And I think that part of the podcast experience is really showing how all of these issues, public health, social justice, all interconnect, and that this is a system. So when organizations are troubleshooting or want to learn more about a certain topic, they can listen to what's been covered.
Absolutely. And I think it's also, also giving opportunities for programs to, again, learn from each other and maybe even think about doing things that they hadn't considered before, or ways to tap into their own resources to expand their programs. I think when I used to work in community, I used to really want to be intentional about our MOUs and our partnerships, and not just put them down to try to get grants, but really how can we partner in order to better serve community. And so I think that is that peer-to-peer learning is truly valuable. So Torrian is one of our newer NASTAD folks. And I think it's also unique, this whole experience. We've been remote for quite some time. So all of that in-person engagement that we would be having with each other and partners is not quite the same. But one, what's your favorite part of your current position at NASTAD?
Oh, wow.
Working with Isaiah Webster. You can say it because he's on the line and reviews and cool points.
I'm not going to do that. But what I will say though, seriously, it's genuinely working with all of you, and I mean that sincerely. As you said, because of the pandemic, some of the things that my job may typically consist of, like traveling and meeting in person with organizations, that hasn't been able to happen. But being able to still do some of that work through the podcast has been fun and engaging, and then doing it with you all has been just that much better, and makes it that much greater. I think the other thing for me is that thus far, I've enjoyed my time here at NASTAD, and just the warm, considerate, thoughtful, team-oriented people that I have been engaged with. Just is definitely different, but it's been great, especially dealing with a pandemic and dealing with social, political uprising and unrest. Right. It's been really good. And so I've been enjoying this ride so far.
And because your stars have shown that you are prone to switching occupations, I really hope that you stay with us for quite some time, because we are learning from you more and more every day. And I can definitely say that I appreciate having you on the NASTAD team. Yes, I am going to put that out there. Stick around.
I am going to put this out there that I said it earlier, I often get a lot of flack for that part, right? What I will say is that I am also one of those people, and if you read further into my chart, they also talk about how I am a person who, if I'm not feeling appreciated or if I'm not feeling valued in a space, then I'm likely to not want to continue in that space. And it could be a blessing or a curse, but my father really gave me that I don't care attitude and I don't need you kind of an attitude. And so I've, for better or for worse, I've always kind of carried that with me. What I will say is that thus far, I do see myself sticking around with NASTAD for a really long time, just because of the culture, just because of the people, and also the work, because for me, it's always like the work is never the issue. It's always the people that you work with potentially. That's the issue. And so I'm feeling like just the kind of the gratitude and appreciation for a lot of the people that I work with. And because I do work closely with Isaiah, he is a part of that, but I'm not going to give him his flowers in this moment just because of the Aries and Scorpio that's been seeping out occasionally. But he is a part of the group of people who I'm appreciative of for working here so far. Yeah.
It is January 8th, 2021, and as Torrian's put it into the universe that he will be here for a little while. So I'm putting the date on here so we have a timestamp.
As you should. I as well, I'm going to jot that down. We'll remember that when the review period comes along. So, but I definitely want to thank you for that. So, for folks who are listening and just want to learn more about NASTAD and what we do and the services we provide, of course, you can reach us on NASTAD.org. And that's also how you can request technical assistance from the prevention team for your CVO or for your Ryan White program from the health departments on the care team. But all of these things are on the website. You can click around and find resources and get to know us better and see how we can support you and your community and the folks that you serve. And with that, I will pass it ever so gently over to Isaiah Webster.
So a couple things. I am so thrilled that those charts seeped their way into every aspect of this episode. That's the first thing. And Bianca, so you asked me 2 questions. You asked Torrian 1 question, and then you didn't ask Nicole any.
Well, one, I'm trying to be cognizant of time and our listeners, but I will say, let me ask Nicole. Nicole, would you like a question? Because I always have some in the purse.
Because you do like asking questions of your interviewing guests, I would love a question.
Okay. So now I have 2. What is your favorite TA modality? And who is your favorite co-host on this podcast?
That's some
You're
fighting
welcome.
words. That's never going to get us to a good place. However, I've not experienced Bianca Ward as a co-host. She has not entered into my rotation. And so I have a hard time really answering who my favorite co-host is because I didn't have experiences
Well, we'll come
with
back
you.
to that then.
So I answered the question 2 first. For question 1, I have really been enjoying. So before coming to NASTAD, one of my favorite things was the trauma-informed toolkit that was put out. That was one of the ways I had more of an affinity towards NASTAD because I'm like, this is some really cool work. I really enjoy the toolkits. I really enjoy how we can supplement peer-to-peer with a follow-up resource. So many of these modalities can stack on top of each other, and I like how there's so many options. So I didn't really answer your questions, but still provided answers.
No, you definitely did. And just to note that our trauma-informed approaches toolkit was produced, by the Healthcare Access Team. You're welcome.
Boop-boop.
Isaiah, on to you.
I did need to correct one misstatement I made earlier at the top of the pod. I said incorrectly that Jupiter has 26 known satellites. She actually has 79. And that is one detail that I wanted to get correct in this pod. Okay, so we've reached the end of our very first all co-host podcast. This was a great time. I just hope that the listeners had as much fun listening as we did talking about it.
Can we do a rapid fire of what we love about the South? What do we want to what do we want from the South as a modeling?
Sure. Would you want to go first?
I'm going to ask I'm asking Bianca to go first because
Okay.
of time.
Okay. See, and now I'm stuck. What I love about the South, as I said in my my bio, the resilience, the community, the pride, and what I want to see for the South, progress, even more so. And I think these past few elections and this election season has shown that we are working towards that. Hopefully. So yeah, progress, continued progress.
I love the community resilience, the family nature, the tight-knitness, which could go either way, good or bad. But as far as what I'd like to see is more investment in the South. We've seen that organizing has been in the South for many, many, many years, decades, centuries, but it takes investment for the work of the organizing to get to where we saw, like in Georgia. That took dedicated investment. Invest in the South.
And I would just say that I love the strong faith and the strong sense of community in the South. Those are two reasons why I really did fall in love with the South. And what I would love to see for the South, I will echo both of your sentiments, just like more progressive progress, right? And really addressing the community needs in really substantial ways. And one of those ways is actually providing finances and resources. And then also, can I just say, health expansion? Like, can we talk about expansion, of healthcare access? I think is important and is definitely needed across the South.
I love the way in the South. And by that, I mean all the different ways that the South is unique and the people are unique. And what I want to see for the South is more of its people. They're beautiful inside and out. And I think that that's some flowers that we need to give every day, all day, as many times as we can give it. This has been delightful. I am so excited to be working on this podcast with all of you. I'm Isaiah Webster.
I'm Nicole Elenoff.
I'm Bianca Ward.
And I'm Torrian Baskerville.
Thanks for listening.